This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is The World Today. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi, and these are your top stories. Abdallah Hamdok's resignation as Prime Minister raises concerns about Sudan's political stability. Germany starts to phase off 3 nuclear-fired power plants. And US President Joe Biden warns Russia against escalating tensions in Ukraine. The political stability of Sudan is once again in the spotlight amid growing demands for a return to civilian rule. Abdallah Hamdok has now resigned as Prime Minister, further complicating the country's transition process. This development comes just 6 weeks after Hamdok was reinstated to his post. He had been ousted and placed under house arrest by the military during a takeover on October 25th. He was eventually reinstated in November in a deal that also called for an independent technocrat cabinet. However, since then, Hamdok has failed to name a government as protests against military rule continue across Sudan. Hamdok's resignation throws Sudan's political future even deeper into uncertainty. The Prime Minister says he was unable to forge political consensus with the military and civilian coalition.
Even after the October 25th coup, we signed a framework with the military in an attempt to get back on track towards the democratic transition, to put an end to the bloodshed, for the release of prisoners, and to safeguard what had been achieved through the past 2 years, and to adhere to the constitutional declaration that governed the transition. This agreement was just another attempt at uniting all sides at the negotiating table and to agree on a document by which the rest of the transitional period could be completed. Based on everything I have mentioned, I decided to give back the responsibility and announce my resignation as Prime Minister, to give a chance to another man or woman of this noble country to continue leading our dear nation and help it pass through what's left of the transitional period to a civilian democratic country.
Well, for the latest on this, let's go live now to Khartoum, where we're joined by Musab Ibrahim. Musab, has there been any reaction so far to Abdallah Hamdok's resignation, and what should we expect from the military authorities in Sudan in the coming days? Seems we have lost Musab Ibrahim. We do apologize for that. We will try and connect with him a little later. For now, though, let's turn to another story in Sudan where 2 people were killed by security forces in the latest round of protests against military rule, and that's according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors. The Pro-Democracy Committee said that one of the victims died of injuries to the head in the capital Khartoum, while the other died of gunshot wounds to the chest in Omdurman city. Sunday was the 12th round of major protests since the military takeover in the country. Protests against military rule have continued even after Abdallah Hamdok was reinstated as Prime Minister last month. Demonstrators are demanding that the military play no role in governments during a transition to free elections. All right, let's go back now to Khartoum to get the latest from Musab Ibrahim, who joins us now live. Musab, of course, it's been a very eventful day, a very eventful 24 hours in Sudan that has left the country with a rather uncertain political future. Talk us through the reaction to Abdallah Hamdok's resignation and what we might expect from military authorities going forward. We do apologize for that. We seem to have lost him again. Right, let's move on now. In Germany, excuse me. In Germany, 3 nuclear-fired power plants are being taken off the electricity grid. The shutdowns are in line with the country's plans to end atomic power, a decision made a decade ago following a reactor meltdown in Japan. From Berlin, here's Trent Murray.
Well, it was back in 2011 that former Chancellor Angela Merkel first promised to phase out nuclear power. Her pledge had come within weeks of Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster, an event which not only shocked many people here in Germany, but also created political pressure for Merkel. Herself, a trained quantum chemist, could now see that many in Germany were worried about the perceived risks associated with the nuclear industry. That makes the shutdown of these 3 nuclear reactors a significant moment. Merkel's original promise was for Germany to phase out nuclear power by 2022. And with the closure of the 3 plants in Schleswig-Holstein, Lower Saxony and Bavaria, that keeps that timeline on track. It leaves Europe's biggest economy with just 3 reactors remaining, but they too are now on borrowed time, with the Environment Ministry pledging to power them all down by the end of 2022 at the latest. Now, nuclear accounts for about 10% of Germany's electricity production, and the shutdown has prompted some uncomfortable questions about how the void will be filled. But the new government, led by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, has set a goal of generating about 80% of the country's electricity from renewable sources like wind and solar by the year 2030. Energy policy is always highly political in Germany, not just because of how important tackling climate change is to vast swathes of the population, but also because in many ways it underpins the country's complicated relationship with Russia. About 40% of Germany's natural gas imports come from Russia, and with gas prices rising right as winter sets in, President Vladimir Putin has promised to come to the rescue, saying the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline has now been filled with gas and is ready to go, pending the final regulatory approvals from authorities here in Berlin. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
Well, perhaps third time is the charm. Let's try again to connect with our correspondent in Khartoum, Musab Ibrahim, who joins us live now on the latest political developments in Sudan. Musab, of course, Abdallah Hamdok has resigned. Talk us through the reaction to his decision and how the military authorities might respond in the coming days.
Hello, can you call me back?
Right, I don't think we have him. Let's move on then. Right, President Joe Biden says the United States and its allies will respond decisively if Russia further invades Ukraine. Biden made the comments during a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky said they also discussed joint action on keeping peace and preventing tensions from escalating on the Ukraine-Russian border. He said Ukraine appreciates the U.S.'s unwavering support. The call comes days after Biden's second conversation in a month with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Kiev and its allies fear Russia has amassed troops on the border in preparation for a new military offensive. Israel has approved a 4th COVID-19 vaccine dose for people over 60 and medical staff. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said on Sunday that the 4th doses were Pfizer vaccines. Recipients must be 60 or older or medical personnel who received the 3rd dose at least 4 months ago. Bennett called the additional booster a new layer of defense and warned the country is likely to see as many as 50,000 new cases. Health Ministry data shows 45% of Israelis have got 3 doses of the vaccines. Now, Dutch police have detained at least 30 protesters. Several thousand people gathered in Museum Square in Amsterdam on Sunday to protest against COVID-19 measures. But public gatherings of more than 2 people are prohibited. Amsterdam's mayor, in response, issued an emergency order empowering police to clear the area. 4 police officers were injured in the clashes. The Netherlands went into a sudden lockdown on December 19th, with all but essential stores closed until at least January 14th. Iraq has held a candlelit vigil at Baghdad airport to honor the deputy leader and a top Iranian general killed in a U.S. drone strike 2 years ago. The January 3rd strike back in 2020 killed Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis, a deputy of Iraq's security forces, and Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. And in Tehran, tens of thousands are expected to attend commemorations later in the day. Ehsan Kevani has more from Tehran.
People in different parts of Iran, particularly in the capital, Tehran, and also in Kerman, the hometown of the late commander, General Qasem Soleimani, are ready to commemorate the second anniversary of the assassination of the commander. Different plans such as rallies and commemorative ceremonies are expected to pay tribute to the popular figure. Thousands of people are leaving Tehran to go to Kerman in the southeast of the country, and that's why extra trains were allocated to carry the passengers to Kerman. Since Thursday, different ceremonies have been held, but the main ceremony is expected to be held in a few hours in Tehran's Grand Musalla, where dozens of thousands are expected to attend. General Soleimani was a very popular figure in Iran and even beyond the country, and today people, especially the youth, will remember his devotion by gathering in Tehran's Grand Musalla.
That's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. See you in a moment.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
The little tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Marawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
Who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
Within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Abdallah Hamdok's resignation as Prime Minister raises concerns about Sudan's political stability. We look at the impact of the fire that razed South Africa's Parliament building in Cape Town. And Ethiopia inaugurates one of the biggest libraries in East Africa. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. Work on the $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline is set to commence in the coming weeks. And in sports, armoured vehicles patrol the streets of Limbe as the Cameroonian city prepares to host AFCON matches. We start the program here in Kenya, where at least 6 people have been killed in an attack by Al-Shabaab militants in the coastal county of Lamu. According to authorities, one of the victims was shot dead, another was hacked to death, while 4 were burnt to death in their homes. Lamu County Commissioner Irungu Macharia says an operation against the attackers is currently underway. The attack appeared to have been anticipated by security agencies, who said the gang had been sighted on the move in the larger Boni forest. Let's turn to Sudan now. The political stability of the country is once again in the spotlight amid growing demands for a return to civilian rule. Abdallah Hamdok has now resigned as Prime Minister, further complicating the country's transition process. This development comes just 6 weeks after Hamdok was reinstated to his post. He had been ousted and placed under house arrest by the military during a takeover on October 25th. He was eventually reinstated in November in a deal that also called for an independent technocratic cabinet. However, since then, Hamdok has failed to name a government as protests against military rule continue across Sudan. Hamdok's resignation throws Sudan's political future deeper into uncertainty. The Prime Minister says he was unable to forge political consensus with the military and civilian coalition.
Even after the October 25th coup, we signed a framework with the military in an attempt to get back on track towards the democratic transition, to put an end to the bloodshed, for the release of prisoners, and to safeguard what had been achieved through the past 2 years, and to adhere to the constitutional declaration that governed the transition. This agreement was just another attempt at uniting all sides at the negotiating table and to agree on a document by which the rest of the transitional period could be completed. Based on everything I have mentioned, I decided to give back the responsibility and announce my resignation as Prime Minister, to give a chance to another man or woman of this noble country to continue leading our dear nation and help it pass through what's left of the transitional period to a civilian democratic country.
Well, let's take a closer look into who Abdallah Hamdok is and what his priorities have been as Prime Minister. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila.
Born in 1956 in South Kordofan State, Abdallah Hamdok studied economics at universities in Khartoum and Manchester. Over the course of his career, Hamdok worked for the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the African Development Bank, and the Trade and Development Bank in Ethiopia. Upon taking office as Prime Minister, he focused his attention on the economic crisis and uniting the country. To address the public debt burden, the Prime Minister began talks with the IMF and World Bank, getting relief on more than $56 billion in debt and access to new funds. He also opened talks with the United States and succeeded in getting Sudan removed from its list of states that sponsor terrorism. In October 2020, he oversaw the signing of a peace deal to end unrest in Darfur, Kordofan and Blue Nile regions. But his economic blueprint ran into trouble when he scrapped fuel subsidies and the devaluation and floating of the currency. The reforms were unpopular and anti-government protests broke out. His troubles escalated in mid-September this year after protesters blockaded Sudan's main seaport, triggering nationwide food and fuel shortages. Divisions within the umbrella civilian alliance in the Sovereign Council also deepened. And in October, Hamdok was placed under house arrest following a military coup. CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's go live now to Khartoum. We're going to be joined by Naba Mohideen for more on the political uncertainty in Sudan. Naba, tell us how the resignation of Abdallah Hamdok has been received and what the situation is like in Khartoum at the moment.
It was received differently by people, political powers and political parties, and some people are frustrated because they think Abdallah Hamdok is a civilian representative. Despite that, with his recent political deal with the military, there was a division in the street itself and the political powers. People are frustrated, but in the same time, the protest blocks. They think that it's one of the achievements because they called for this resignation earlier. They want Abdallah Hamdok to resign and to step down from the military deal because it gives the military a political cover and a political incubator. So there is division in the street, and some people are frustrated, but some people, they think it's good for the protest to Abdallah Hamdok to resign because now they have one goal, which is to oust the military from the political scene.
Right, and Naba, now that he has resigned, what's likely to happen next? Do you think there will be some kind of process of trying to get another civilian prime minister in power?
Actually, it's tricky because now protesters will not protest to have another or new prime minister, because this is not the goal of the protest that we saw since October 25th. The protest is against the military coup, and it's against the military to be guardian of the political scene in the country. So we may see many scenarios. One of it is to see an iron fist and control of the military on the political scene and a new appointment of a prime minister. And that means it will take people back to 2019 when they oust al-Bashir and al-Burhan took control of the power. One of the other scenarios is a confrontation between the military and the civilians, which is the protesters. Protests will continue and fragile situation will continue, and this will make chaos and more uncertainty. And other thing is there is calls from the political powers and protest blocs is to make a unified declaration with a government of technocrats, and declare it and see any kind of compromisement, but not with this military leadership. They want al-Burhan and Hemeti out of the political scene. So there is many scenarios, but definitely it will be more fragile situation, and we may see chaos in the coming weeks.
And that is worrying indeed. I mean, you talk about an iron fist approach of military control. Considering the dangers that protesters have faced, are they likely to continue these demonstrations against military rule?
Actually, yes, the demonstrations will continue, and tomorrow there is a March of Million, and there is at least 6 March of Million in January alone, and more than 7 not scheduled yet. So the protest will continue because, as I earlier said, it's not against Abdallah Hamdok to be reinstated or resigned. It's about the military to step down from the political scene and for the democratic change and for the civilian government. So we will see even more protests after the resignation of Abdallah Hamdok, because for people now, Abdallah Hamdok gave the military coup a political cover, and now there is no political cover. So if the military did not take any step, there will be protests. If they appoint anyone or took any step, there will be protests. So yes, March of Million will continue till the end of January, and may we see it in the coming month.
Nabo Mohideen, thank you so much for that update. Joining us there live from Khartoum. While staying with this story, at least 2 people were killed by security forces in the latest round of protests against military rule, and that's according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors. The Pro-Democracy Committee said one of the victims died of injuries to the head in the capital Khartoum, while the other died of gunshots to the chest in Omdurman. Sunday was the 12th round of major protests since the military took over the country. Protests against military rule have continued even after Abdallah Hamdok was reinstated as Prime Minister last month. Demonstrators continue to demand that the military play no role in government during a transition to free elections. Well, let's bring you some analysis now on these latest developments in Sudan. Joining me from Accra, Ghana is Matthew Benson, a research associate in the Peace and Conflict Resolution Evidence Platform at the London School of Economics. Matthew, welcome to the program. Tell us, what might have been some of the underlying factors that led to the resignation of Abdallah Hamdok as Sudan's Prime Minister?
I mean, Hamdok was given an impossible job. I mean, he had to overcome decades of military control over the main revenue sources in the country, and he had to dismantle a security apparatus which does not see itself in any way being able to be beholden to the public and sees itself as enriched. There's a need for a large-scale bargain between people and government in the state, which Hamdok was. He's a technocrat. He's a wonderfully skilled technocrat and has huge support in the international community and with other academics and these kind of things. But it wasn't clear that he was necessarily a skilled politician. And the skilled politics are really desperately going to be needed in order to forge what is going to be a very fraught, politically contentious transition, if there is to be one in Sudan.
I mean, that is the key question. What does his resignation now mean for the fate of this transition process in the country, and what, if anything, can be done to ensure that it stays on track?
Now's the time for, I mean, it was always a time for real politics, but now's the time for serious pragmatism, and now's the time to really think through how to ensure the transition process actually takes place. So it's really a time to think through how is it that you can actually incentivize military and security forces that are backed by the military, incentivize them to no longer play by rules which are their own, to actually be beholden to formal rules and look at and actually challenge them to sort of look at alternatives that aren't just playing off the books and sort of enriching themselves rather than actually playing for the benefit of Sudanese people. So I think now is a moment to look towards lessons from other countries that have transitioned, perhaps looking at a lot of Soviet bloc countries after the fall of the end of the Cold War, perhaps also looking at countries that have transitioned from conflict or from other types of narrowly led rule. So looking at maybe South Africa, perhaps also Rwanda post-genocide, but really looking at pragmatic measures that can be done incrementally to bring people to the table and actually not necessarily look for justice immediately, but certainly to look for ways that you can actually forge a political bargain and a political consensus that prevents conflict and actually listens to the will of the people and forges a democratic Sudan, which this is a rare moment in Sudan's history where there's a real push that this is a window that needs to be seized to ensure that there is actually a democratic Sudan that actually works for the majority of the people. This has not been the case since British occupation. It was not the case under Sudanese independence. And it's a big part of why the country remains deeply fragmented and led to also the separation of South Sudan and the continued unrest in places such as Kordofan and Darfur.
And it sometimes feels as though pragmatic solutions are beyond the reach of the political system of Sudan, just because there is a great degree of mistrust and friction between the military and civilian components of Sudan's governance.
Yes, there really is. And there's a long history for that. And it's going to take, my biggest fear at the moment is really that Sudan's protesters, which need to remain peaceful, because the moment that actually things shift towards any type of protesters mobilizing against or developing their own security forces against the military and any sort of security force that is backed by the military, increases the risk of civil war, increases the risk of conflict, armed conflict between protesters and between the security forces. So really at a moment where this continued and the protesters have been extraordinarily well organized. They've learned from the lessons of previous attempts from the Arab Spring and so forth, and really look towards other countries such as Libya and sort of think, well, we don't want to do that. So how is it that we can do something genuinely different and transform this country in a way that everyone has been hoping for decades? So I think at the moment we cannot give up hope on the protesters, and the international community really needs to work better at linking with a variety of scholars and activists, and also some technocrats and so forth, to really think through how is it that you can forge links between protester demands and between and prevent this conflict from getting any worse and actually spiraling into something that does lead to the increased fragmentation of the state.
Indeed. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. That's Matthew Benson, live there in Accra. Well, you are watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. We take a look at the impact of the fire that razed South Africa's Parliament building in Cape Town. And Ethiopia inaugurates one of the biggest libraries in the Eastern Africa region.
Hey there, my name is Asta Tao, and there are 3 things you should know about me. I love food, I'm obsessed with history, and I travel whenever I can. So join me as I explore cultures through food, meet innovative chefs, and celebrate Africa's diversity.
Firefighters in South Africa say the huge blaze at the country's parliament in Cape Town has been brought under control. A man has been arrested in connection with the fire and will appear in court on Tuesday. Rene Delcam reports.
Authorities say the fire is believed to have started in the early hours of Sunday morning. Firefighters responded within minutes. But the blaze quickly spread from the old House of Assembly to the iconic National Assembly, where South Africa's first democratic president, Nelson Mandela, was elected in 1994.
It's very sad because Parliament is the house of our democracy. This is where the members of Parliament hold the executive to the account. This is where we have debates. We have the State of the Nation address here every year. And there are lots of memories. There's a lot of history here.
President Cyril Ramaphosa described the fire as devastating and disappointing, especially as it came just one day after the funeral of anti-apartheid hero Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu.
And to wake up to the devastating news of the burning down of the National Assembly or Parliament is just really a terrible setback. But notwithstanding the damage that has been caused to the National Assembly, the work of Parliament will carry on.
The president said it appeared as though Parliament's sprinkler system had not worked as it was supposed to. He also confirmed that a suspect was being held and questioned in connection with the fire.
I believe somebody is being held right now and they are being questioned, but we need to go a lot deeper into how this type of event can take place and what measures we will need to take going forward. But for now, I think we should be grateful that the National Assembly Parliament has not been razed to ashes and to the floor.
Renard Al-Kham, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
The Ethiopian government has commissioned a state-of-the-art library in the capital, Addis Ababa. The library is said to be one of the biggest in the region. At the inauguration, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said such facilities will help Ethiopia overcome illiteracy. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
Here it is, the first modern and strategically built library of Ethiopia, and it's officially commissioned by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Addis Ababa's Mayor Adanej Habebe. Dubbed Abrot or Enlightenment, is expected to serve hundreds of thousands of students, researchers, and any other person from now on. At the inaugural event, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said this library marks Ethiopia as a nation and will serve to defeat illiteracy with enlightenment.
Because of illiteracy, we have been fighting one another. We have destroyed our country. Illiteracy has made us sell out and attack our nation by becoming messengers of our enemies. All of this will be solved, especially when our children are enlightened. When enlightenment comes, the generation will understand the true meaning of a nation, freedom, history, and they will understand the benefits of prosperity and the journey to it. This library, therefore, will serve as a deliverer of knowledge to the people.
The library is built in a whopping 19,000 meter squares of land. It has cost 1.15 billion birr, that is about 25 million US dollars. The construction was completed in just 18 months with close supervision of the Addis Ababa city administration.
This library is built based on any global standard. It has a beautiful architectural design. It has also become one of the top 10 libraries in the continent. The shelves of this library are more than 1.5 kilometers. 8 book-selling shops are also part of this library.
This Enlightenment Library is part of the mega Addis Ababa City Beautification and Infrastructure Projects, also known as the Sugar Project. Already, the city has got a new park, square, and all-inclusive entertainment village located in the Entoto Mountains. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the best is yet to come for Addis Ababa.
This library is one of the most meaningful buildings we have put together right after the reform. But the much better one will be the Science Museum. Especially when it comes to size and quality, the Science Museum, now under construction, will be much, much better.
Ethiopia's newest and biggest library has 100,000 books in it, with also more than thousands of contents suited for the blind and visually impaired. The 4-story Enlightenment can accommodate 2,000 people all at once. Ethiopia now is engaged in the work of post-conflict construction and already counting the costs and fixing the basic infrastructure of the nation in the war-affected areas seems to be completed. To claim victory, however, in this area, the country needs time and billions of dollars of investment. Grumjala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In southern Africa, the mountainous kingdom of Lesotho is looking to cash in on tourists who are seeking a more adventurous skiing destination than the well-worn slopes of Europe's Alps mountain range. Let's take a look.
Suggest a holiday in Africa, and most people picture safaris or beaches. Few think of skiing. Yet the continent contains 5 mountain ranges with enough seasonal snow to make slopes. Tucked into South Africa's stunning Drakensberg Range is a skiing resort in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho.
Talk about skiing and snow, people don't
don't relate to Africa. I mean, it's like you say, people think of the Alps and the Rockies in Canada and, you know, like bigger mountains. But I mean, this area of Lesotho has actually got quite a unique climate, and also because of the altitude. I mean, we're sitting at 3,000 meters where we're standing now. Top of the mountain is just 3,222.
It's a good day for Hope Ramokhocho. He is a skiing and snowboarding instructor here, and he loves slicing and gliding his way down a snow-covered slope.
Africa is, you know, you wouldn't actually even think of it. I think that's what actually amazes most people, because they're like, okay, let's see what we have. Yes, it isn't much, but people come in and have a whole lot of fun.
When he isn't enjoying himself on the snow, he's teaching visitors how to ski.
I think transferring of knowledge is all that actually keeps me going. I love giving new knowledge to people, and I also love progression. Seeing it happen actually makes me very happy.
As with other tourist spots, the COVID-19 pandemic and travel restrictions have drastically slashed visitor numbers. For those who are still able to make their way to Afri-Ski, Ramokhocho will be waiting to teach them.
It is my first time here. It was something very different. My knees and feet are paining. I broke a sweat, you know, unexpectedly, but it was mad fun. Yeah.
I haven't skied before, but it's been challenging and fun at the same time, because I haven't done something this spontaneous, you know. I've always been, so I just decided to try skiing for the first time, and I loved it.
As the new year begins with eased COVID-19 travel restrictions, Lesotho hopes this will boost tourism again. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, time for a short break. Your business news up next. Work on the $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline is set to commence in the coming weeks.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Work on the $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline is set to commence in the coming weeks. And this follows the signing of an intergovernmental agreement in April between Uganda, Tanzania and the oil firms Total and CNOOC. With that report, here's CGTN's Michael Baleke.
Early this year, Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni, Tanzania's President Samia Hassan Suluhu and oil companies Francis Total and China's CNOOC agreed to kickstart the process of constructing a crude oil pipeline. Once completed, the EACOP will be the longest heated pipeline in the world. The project is expected to stimulate trade and investment, but also unlock the region's oil potential.
The project will yield revenues to both countries while creating short and long-term employment for both highly skilled and semi-skilled professionals, as well as casual laborers, thus addressing the unemployment challenge, especially among the youth.
Uganda discovered its oil in 2006 and has since confirmed 6.5 billion barrels in place. The pipeline is expected to export the crude oil to the international market through Tanzania's Indian Ocean port of Tanga. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni says the pipeline will strengthen the cooperation between the two countries, but also promote regional integration.
This pipeline project can be a core of bigger developments if the brothers in Congo and South Sudan choose to also use it for their oil. At the maximum, it can carry 230,000 barrels per day. Besides, the same corridor can take a return gas pipeline supplying Tanzanian and Mozambican gas to Uganda and the Great Lakes region.
Uganda has over the years revised its timelines for oil production, the latest being 2025. This is attributed to delays in negotiations over the oil investments and setting up of key infrastructure needed for oil production. The delays have frustrated local entrepreneurs seeking to tap in the black gold business.
This talk around opportunities in the oil and gas sector has taken long, and some SMEs took out loans, invested, and then waited, and things didn't turn out. There's a sense in which people feel that it's this proverbial wolf that opportunities are coming.
However, the government insists concrete agreements have been signed and some projects are about to get off the ground. The East African crude oil pipeline has also suffered setbacks in funding, with some prospective lenders pulling out of the project, citing environmental and social concerns. Uganda's oil and gas fields are found within national parks, near key lakes and rivers, and forested lands. Conservationists argue that in case of a spill, the risk to the environment will be devastating.
Part or the majority of the oil that is going to be transported by the EACOP is going to be taken from Murchison Falls National Park. Now, we know that Murchison Falls National Park is one of Uganda's oldest and one of Uganda's largest national parks. The park is also one of the most biodiverse. It has a number of animals and a number of plants that are important in and for their own, because biodiversity must exist for itself, but also important for the survival of Ugandans and humanity at large.
But the government says they are working on legislation that is compliant with global climate laws to protect the environment, a move that is giving the funders more confidence to invest in the project. And the Petroleum Authority says the engineering designs for the pipeline are complete. Compensation plans for land acquisition are underway, and procurement of logistics for the pipeline are in motion. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Binti, Swahili for Young Woman, has made history by being the first Tanzanian film to get on the global streaming platform Netflix. Produced by local company Black Unicorn Studios, the film's widely anticipated Netflix release on the 7th of this month is expected to revolutionize the country's film industry. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Tanzania is not known for making movies, but Binti, a story about perseverance told through the lives of 4 women getting on streaming platform Netflix, might change that.
They believed in the story, that it was a universal story that would be able to resonate with people from all across the globe.
The film's producers, sisters Angela and Alinda Ruhinda, say local filmmakers have many good ideas, but realizing them has been challenging.
Telling stories takes money, and there are not a lot of opportunities to get the funding for a good quality film. Yeah.
More than 100 crew members and actors worked on the film. Many of them see bigger doors opening after getting on Netflix.
Now Godliver is in this platform, so she has been upgraded. You need to pay her accordingly. You need to value her.
The movie has also caught the attention of many film lovers in the country.
This is my first time watching a Swahili movie that is Binti, and it's impressive, amazing.
I think it will be amazing, and personally I cannot wait.
The film's producers say because of Netflix's high standards, it took them a year to negotiate access to the platform's 214 million subscribers. Now that they're on it, the producers say more movies from Tanzania are in the pipeline.
By getting a film on Netflix, Tanzania follows in the footsteps of countries like Nigeria, South Africa and Kenya, which have movies and series on the streaming platform. The country's filmmakers now hope to carve out a name for themselves in the world of filmmaking. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
You're watching Africa Live. Your sports news up next. Coming up, armoured vehicles patrol the streets of Limbe as the Cameroonian city prepares to host AFCON matches.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Let's begin in Cameroon, where the Africa Cup of Nations finals are scheduled to start less than a week from now. Concern is growing in the country's conflict-torn southwest region, where militant separatists have vowed to disrupt the tournament. Droves of armored vehicles are patrolling the streets of Limbe ahead of Sunday's kickoff. CGTN's Daniela Pearson reports.
Cameroon is hosting the 2021 AFCON in 6 cities, but security is potentially most at threat in Limbe, a city on the tropical Atlantic coast whose surrounding region has been rocked by armed attacks since war broke out in 2017. The conflict, in which armed groups are trying to form a breakaway state called Ambazonia, has killed at least 3,000 people and forced nearly 1 million to flee. Violence has worsened this year as separatists increase their use of improvised explosives.
My fear and the fear of many Limbe denizens is that the recent phenomenon of bomb blasts, which has been happening in other parts of Fako division like in Buya, can be a common phenomenon during this AFCON period.
Insecurity is just one issue facing the tournament. Concerns about the readiness of stadiums and the spread of the Omicron COVID-19 variant have also made headlines in recent weeks. Limbe's Omnisport Stadium will host matches from Group F, comprising Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania and Gambia. The group's first game will be between Tunisia and Mali on the 12th of January. Authorities have kept security plans under wraps, but promise there will be no disruption to Group F matches.
It is in the same context that we managed the CHAN a few months ago. So I can't reveal here the measures that are being put in place, but you should know that just as the CHAN took place under very good conditions, AFCON will also take place under very good conditions. There are no worries. There's nothing to worry about.
Armed police, gendarmes and soldiers are already positioned at major intersections. Checkpoints have been set up on roads into the city. But despite the fears, some in Limbe are prepared to welcome hopefully many fans in the city.
With such an event, we do believe it will boom our business because so many customers will come from different areas, different towns, different countries. We meet so many other people that will meet new friends, make new friends. I'm very happy for the event.
24 nations will be taking part in the 33rd edition of the AFCON that was postponed by a year due to the global pandemic. Algeria will be defending the title they won at the Egypt 2019 finals. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Now to the English Premier League.